Today we're going to be comparing two of my favorite verses. This, of course, being Bleach and Jujutsu Kaisen. Though most people agree Bleach washes, I think it'll be interesting to compare the characters a bit. I will also be equalizing the verses, so domains can hit Soul Reapers and the Soul Reapers can be seen by the sorcerers. To be clear, in this battle, I will be very conservative with how I scale Bleach. On top of that, I will be making a lot of benefit of the doubts to JJK. This does not reflect my actual scaling opinion, so take this with a grain of salt. There still will be information on scaling in this video you may not know, so if you are here for that, you'll still get something. Now to the actual topic. This is Gojo's Next Generation versus the Soul Society in place of Ichigo and friends. Gojo's Next Generation will be considered Yuji, Yuta, Hakari, and Maki. They will be invading the Soul Society to save Nobara, who will be taking the place of Rukia. Basically think of this as what if Aizen planted the Hogyoku into Nobara and the Soul Society was planning to execute her. Remember, this is about how these characters would interact in the Soul Society arc and less about scaling. With that said, let's get into how they stack up. Starting with speed, Yuta, Maki, Hakari, and Yuji should be relative. We have statements calling Hakari, Maki, and Yuta the heavy hitters. If one of them was above the other by a large margin, it'd be odd to share the title since it would just be the heavy hitter. We also know Gojo said if he gets weaker than Hakari or Yuta, they should go in to fight Sukuna. Finally, we have statements saying Hakari is stronger than Yuta, but of course Maki denies this. These statements are probably just to show they are comparative level of fighters. You can link Yuji to him via his fight where he seems to be keeping up with Yuta and Rika, and later when Yuji is fighting Sukuna one-on-one in the last chapters. He's probably below them, but he doesn't seem far below. For cross-verse speed feats, we know Toji, who's equal to Maki, can perceive Nue's lightning in slow motion in the anime. We also have showings of Hakari dodging lightning as well. This would put them at the Mach 4000 or massively hypersonic range on the Versus Battle Wiki tier. If you think Yuta scales to 15 finger Sukuna, then there's also Mach 200 calcs. It's all up to interpretation, really. This would put them above the Mach 3 downplay though, which we already know Maki should be above. I'm just giving a few options. For attack potency, we need to be a bit more generous. We know Dagon can create an island in their domain, as well as Jogo seems to create a mountain. Without getting too deep into the inverse, there's a few ways to link them. But we see Toji destroy Dagon and Maki is equal to that, so that's the simplest way. For Jogo, it's much more complicated, and he's just another route you could take to get them to mountain level. With their main attack potency out of the way, I want to mention Black Flash. The Black Flash is a to the power of 2.5 amp, which is a very crazy amp. It could launch you up a tier, or multiple AP tiers. The problem with this is there's showings of people who are relative surviving a Black Flash from someone else. If two people are relative with, for example, planetary attack potency and one hits a Black Flash, it should kill the target very easily. Gege also has statements where he seems to not understand how the exponent works. I'm not saying it's not a win con, it just seems inconsistent and something that should be noted. Now, let's get into Bleach's side of things. One more reminder, this will be a very conservative, very safe scale to make the fight interesting and fair. For Bleach's speed, we have Ichigo very early on dodging Shrieker's explosions. Dodging an explosion would put him at supersonic speeds. He later is comparable to Renji, who's only at 20%. Then he goes on to keep up with a full power Renji and Ikkaku, which should put him at high hypersonic speeds. He then gets a 5 times amp in Bankai, which would put him at massively hypersonic. The reason Ichigo's speed matters is because we can kind of build tiers for each level of opponent the next generation will be fighting. For the low tier lieutenants, they'll probably be around high hypersonic since they should be massively above the suppressed Renji. Then any captains you scale to or above Bankai Ichigo should be in that massively hypersonic tier. This is a very low ball for these characters, but once again, it's just to make it more fair. The captain tier fighters can also be pushed 10 times higher, seeing as a good amount of them probably have full mastery over their Bankai. This gets even crazier when you take into account the gap between people like Yamamoto and Soul Society Ichigo, so it's probably much more. For Bleach, the attack potency is very straightforward. Captains like Toshiro are stated in the data book to be capable of controlling the weather. We also have calcs for his storms, which reach mountain level. We have other calcs like the cannonball they use to enter the Seirete, shaking the entire area, which is calced at island level. Ichigo seems to make up a big portion of this energy. They actually tried to get him to lower his output. Ichigo then fights a pretty close fight with Ikkaku and Renji. He's also getting constantly stronger and unlocks Bankai with a 5 times amp. There are captains who are much higher than island level, like Yamamoto, who has a planetary Bankai. He'll be kind of an outlier though, but what's important is that most relevant people should be mountain or island level. Now, for the interactions, Yuji and Yuta will replace Ichigo and be going down his path. Hakari will replace Uryu, and Maki will replace Chad. Finally, Rukia is replaced by Nobara, and the Hogyoku is still inside of her. To start with the gate interaction with Jidambo, this is going very bad for him. Ichigo deals with him with relative ease and he has little actual scaling, so he'll get dealt with. The first problem arises with Gin, where he's very dangerous, but I doubt they die here. We see in the Soul Society arc he lets Ichigo go, so he will probably do that here and just make sure they don't get into the gate. Once this happens, they'll probably need to head to the Shiba family so that they can find a way into the Seirete. Unless they have a guide, they probably won't be able to find them. For the sake of the topic, we'll say they have a guide like Yoruichi and can find a way in. This is where it gets interesting. As they are launched into the Soul Society, they'll have to deal with being split up similarly to Ichigo and his friends. Yuji and Yuta's first problem will be Ikkaku and Yumachika. If Ganju is sent with them, then Yumachika will be dealt in the same way he was in the series. However, if he isn't, then Yuta and Yuji will have to deal with both of them. They might have to split into 1v1s where Yuta will end up fighting Ikkaku and Yuji will end up fighting Yumachika. Unlike Ganju, Yuji won't have to play keep away and will probably run straight at Yumachika and start throwing hands. Yumachika will notice that this human with no Zanpakuto is throwing punches that are interacting with his soul and shaking him. Since Yumachika is used to protecting his soul as its nature for a soul reaper, this won't be dangerous, but it will be surprising. He'll probably respond by activating his Shikai. If he strikes Yuji, he will also notice that Yuji is healing off the damage, which may also come as a big surprise. Yuji could also use blood manipulation techniques like Supernova to deal big damage and just pummel Yumachika. If Yumachika decides to use his true Shikai, Yuji could respond with a Soul Dismantle in an attempt to separate Yumachika from his Zanpakuto, or at the very least disrupt his technique. Similar to how he disrupts Sukuna's connection to Megami Soul. While I personally think Soul Dismantle being used to separate a Shinigami from their Zanpakuto is far-fetched, I believe that it could disrupt the synergy between the Shinigami and the Zanpakuto, making it so their technique isn't as efficient. If Yuta at this point is still fighting Ikkaku, then Yuji will join in and they'll win together. I think that Yuta should be able to beat Ikkaku on his own though, without much trouble. Even pre-summoning Rika, his stats are crazy. He should be able to clash with Ikkaku numerous times with his sword alone. The second Ikkaku starts losing, he'll activate Shikai the same way. It won't threaten Yuta very much though, as he can summon Rika to end the fight very casually. Though personally I don't think he'll need that. For Hakari, he'll probably just go on a rampage, just running around and throwing hands with everybody in his way, trying to meet up with Yuji and Yuta. If he ends up in a similar situation as Uryu, where Jirobo Ikanakaza attacks him, it won't even be a threat, as that seeded member has 0 good showings and will probably just get beat up the same way. Hakari will differ from Uryu heavily though. He'll just beat up Squad 12 members instead of sneaking around. This will quickly catch Mayuri's attention, who will set up a trap by having a group of his squad members set up to fight Hakari, then he'll just blow them. Hakari getting blown up probably won't faze him, since it's in character for him to go for jackpots each fight. He may just heal off the explosion or just use cursed energy reinforcement to tank it. Mayuri showing up will be his first real threat. Hakari won't back down though, at all. Mayuri's speed stat in the data book is pretty low, so I think Hakari having a stat advantage isn't too crazy. In this fight, Mayuri will use the same tactics where he'll throw Nimue in the way to hit Hakari. Hakari may not care about punching her though, but him getting hit is still pretty likely. Hakari doesn't seem to think about getting hit at all because of his abilities, so he will probably either heal it off, or if he's in jackpot, he'll reroll the damage. The problem isn't the damage though, it's the poison which paralyzes Mayuri's opponents. Since Hakari will take this hit, he'll fall down from the poison. This won't stop him though, because Hakari is a prodigy. He's shown the capability to subconsciously adapt and heal poisons from his bloodstream. As soon as he's hit, he'll begin to heal and get right back up. This will take Mayuri off guard, who will probably go straight into Bankai to try and beat Hakari. Hakari won't be fazed by any poisons, and since Mayuri isn't familiar with Hakari's abilities, he'll probably get beaten up until he runs away. After running though, Mayuri will definitely stalk Hakari and take note of his abilities, waiting for a moment to dissect him. This is where we see a big change. When Uryu beat Mayuri, he was extremely weakened and losing his powers. Hakari is completely different. His abilities allow him to keep himself fresh and continuously pop domains. His next fight will be Tosen. Since Uryu was weak, this was just a stomp, but with a fresh Hakari, this will be a completely different fight. Before we get to that, let's talk about Maki. Maki will be much different from Chad. Since she has no energy, she'll be completely invisible to most. She probably won't engage with just anyone. There's a super high chance she doesn't even attack Shunsui. She'll probably run through and attack people off guard to get information on where Nobara is kept. For reference, in No Breaths from Hell, we see a hollow from hell with no Ryatsu take Ichigo off guard. So imagine that, but with Maki, who also has a durability negating sword. She could sneak attack Shunsui, but once she realizes how strong he is, she'll probably leave unless she can kill him in one clean blow, which I highly doubt is probable. Once she figures out where Nobara is, she'll make a beeline for Nobara and retrieve her. Even if some barriers are up to keep people out, she might be able to slip through them and head straight into the cell. This is because of her immunity to domains and barriers. Anything put against her should see her as an object. Of course, this assumes there are no captains at the time, though, which would throw a wrench in her plan. Her next move would probably be to wait and sneak attack someone who's threatening one of her other classmates. With that said, let's get back to the main characters, whose next fight will be Renji. This fight won't be too tough since it's a 2v1, and Renji can't use Bankai just yet. He will be a bit tougher, but a manifested Rika or possibly even a domain expansion should make the fight easy. Where the real challenge comes is with their next fight versus Kenpachi. Not only should they be a bit worn out from fighting, since at this point they fought 3 strong Soul Reapers without much break. They'll probably have used reverse curse technique a few times, which burns a pretty good amount of cursed energy. Yuta should be fine because of his crazy pool of cursed energy, and Yuji being a death painting would be able to use RCT plenty or reattach limbs with blood manipulation. If a domain was used at all, that'll have drained Yuta. I doubt he would have needed to use it though. What's even more terrifying is that their opponent, Kenpachi, will level himself out with whatever opponent he's going up against. If his subconscious power capping takes into account both fighters, which it probably will, then he may be at a level where he can contend with both at once. The fight will probably start with both sides rushing each other. Yuji will probably be supported by Rika so that he can more easily tag Kenpachi. Yuta will try his abilities like Curse Speech and Granite Blast, but this probably won't be as effective as it is in Jujutsu Kaisen. Kenpachi himself explains that a stronger spiritual energy can cancel out techniques and even offers for Ichigo to cut him as proof. Yuta and Yuji will have to resort to a domain to amplify their output. Kenpachi is pretty simple. He'll just slash at them full force and fight with extreme bloodlust. He'll rely on physical capabilities to tank most attacks. If he decides to use both hands though, at any point in this fight, he may outright kill one. I think the best way to beat him will be to use a domain to get constant damage on him with the sure hit or do a love blast. Kenpachi, being the madman he is, may try to cut the entire domain in half or clash with the love blast. Destroying a domain from the inside is nearly impossible, but not completely impossible. Outside of the inside being extremely tough, the domain's barrier also just weakens the output as a whole. On top of that, it raises Yuta's output as a whole by arguably a Black Flash level amp based on states by Gege. This will be their first high diff fight where we may possibly lose one of our MCs, but with the combination of domain damage and Yuta attacking with Yuji, they can win. If he uses both hands, he could probably kill one of them, or if Maki shows up, she could attack Kenpachi off guard and win. Regardless, after this fight, assuming they live, they'll need to find a place to rest and heal. Even though they may not have Hanataro like Ichigo did, they still have healing capabilities. The main problem is more so finding a good place to rest and finding their way to the prison. After this, there's a good chance Maki meets up with them if she's not already there to report what she knows and find them someplace to rest, which will likely be the sewer. Before we continue with them though, we have to go back to Hakari to see where he arrives. Hakari's next fight will be Tosen, and he has the perfect matchup for this. For starters, he'll go for his signature domain to land jackpot. In domain, he can reroll damage, so he can continue as if it never happened. Tosen will probably realize he needs to use Bankai. I did say that Bankai is a 5x amp, but it's important to remember that the domain should debuff Tosen, so his stats won't be as high as they normally are. In this Bankai, Hakari won't be able to see, hear, feel, or even sense energy, but this won't matter. We've seen Kenpachi use the method of getting hit so he can figure out where Tosen is at. This is perfect for Hakari. He'll be able to get hit over and over, and if he hits a jackpot, he can heal off, or if he's still in his domain, he'll just re-roll the damage. Hakari will just get hit, counterattack, and heal the damage over and over. After a long beating, Hakari will win and continue his rampage. With all the commotion he's causing, another captain may be sent to catch him. We have no way of knowing who's closest though, so who and how their fight would go is unknown. What we do know is he's probably going to want to find Yuta and Yuji. He may also just run to the prison if he has information on Nobara being there, which will lead to him getting jumped and beaten, probably by multiple captains, since he can be sensed. If he does take the route of going to find Yuji and Yuta, this will mean we have all four together. Since they don't need to train like Ichigo, they'll probably head straight to the prison. This will mean Nobara isn't about to be executed, so the fighting ground will be different. When they pull up, there's a few scenarios that could happen. The first scenario is Yamamoto pulls up and slaughters them all. An alternate is that Shunsui and Ukitake, being confused as to why this human is so high priority, decides that this is wrong and goes to fight Yamamoto. We know Byakuya will probably show up because he's so lawful and won't allow interference. Who else will show up is a bit confusing. Soifon may show up, in which if Yoruichi has been acting as a guide, then they'll fight again. If not, then Maki could fight Soifon. There's another possibility where Maki has already grabbed Nobara and just ran out with her classmates, in which case they win. This is the boring option though. So for the sake of entertainment, the final interaction will be that Yuji and Yuta are fighting Byakuya, Maki is keeping Soifon away, and Hakari will be fighting Komamura. Since Hakari beat up Tosen, that would probably piss Komamura off quite a bit. Let's start off with Maki. Maki fighting Soifon, if it's in a forested location or a heavily obscured location, then Maki will probably jump out and attack. Once this happens, Soifon will become more wary, which will change the way that Maki fights. Since she's been found, she'll probably try to brawl with Soifon, where she'll have the advantage. We've seen Maki fight on par with Sukuna and survive 2 black flashes. This Sukuna has the perfect body for sorcery and a mound of combat experience. I think this safely shows Maki should be a bit above, especially when you stack on statements of her having strength of unmatched caliber, quote unquote. The problem is Soifon's Shikai, where if she hits you in the same place twice, you die. If Soifon yaps about her ability, then she's definitely not landing that second hit in the same space. Even if she doesn't talk about her ability, it will definitely be tough to land those 2 hits. Maki's win con is much more simple, which is pretty much just to slash her opponent to nothing. She'll definitely go for a killing blow as well. If I had to give it to one of them, I'd probably give it to Maki. I mean, she's not just gonna let herself get hit unless she has to, and has durability negation. Once she wins, she could either go help Hakari or Yuji and Yuta, in which case she'll probably wait for a good time and get a killing blow in on someone. Onto Hakari, he'll have an extremely tough time with Komamura's Bankai being a giant monster. It'll be hard for Hakari to get close. What's also concerning is that if he can't catch that creature into his domain, then it may attack the domain from the outside and shatter it. If he can trap Komamura and the creature all at once, then he could just continuously heal and stall. To win, he'll probably need to rush Komamura and dodge attacks to avoid a head-crushing blow. His win cons are very few outside of outlasting or outstatting if you think he's stronger. Another good bet would be if Maki or Kenpachi showed up. In this scenario, Maki would have to win her fight and immediately head to help with a sneak attack. A sneak attack with a Duraneg Katana should do a huge amount of damage, then they can tag team for a win. Alternatively, assuming Yuji and Yuta beat Kenpachi but he still lives, Kenpachi might find himself wanting to help this group of strong individuals. If he shows up with the assist, the combo of him and Hakari should take home the win. However, I could probably see more of Kenpachi wanting to solo it rather than 2v1. If Hakari's domain gets shattered though, or he misses a jackpot, he very well could die here. One final thing Hakari could do is trap Komamura in a domain, then change coordinates to separate Komamura from his Bankai's creature. Komamura could just deactivate and reactivate Bankai though. For this fight, it probably just ends in a long drawn-out battle until either another captain shows up and jumps Hakari or Maki arrives to save Hakari with a sneak attack. I like to think that the latter would happen before the former. On to the final battle. Yuji and Yuto will have their hands full. With Byakuya's Bankai, his crowd control is elite. As well, when he uses his hands, he can make his Bankai move 2 times faster. Landing hits on him will be tough. I think in this fight a domain will be necessary. Now, if we go off any light speed feats, then Byakuya could just run out of the domain. Since we're only scaling him to massively hypersonic though, he will be caught. Now, depending on the sure hit, this could be the end. A technique extinguishment could turn off Byakuya's use of techniques and then they'd be able to beat him up, as well as a soul dismantle, making Byakuya's use of Simbone Zakura less effective, as I went over earlier. Alternatively, a cleave sure hit would cause enough damage to kill it. Byakuya would have to rely on his speed to strike Yuta enough to shatter the domain before the sure hit does too much damage. Now, of course, if the domain shatters, then Yuji could pop his own domain finally. I think this would be the first time he popped it, since they could rely on Yuta for more versatile sure hits as well as his higher curse energy amount. Once Yuji's domain comes out, Byakuya will have to damage him enough to force it to shatter. If he can manage this, then the fight will probably end with all three being extremely hurt and exhausted. In which case, I can see it ending with Yuta needing to use all he has into a love blast, while Byakuya gives all he's got into a final Shuke Haku Taiken. Since their stats are close based on our scaling, they should both be weakened from this, but they could live. Yuji would need to get up and finish Byakuya, or they could take an alternative option. This fight isn't just about stats or abilities. It involves all three people's ideals. Something not many people notice is that Byakuya, Yuji, and Yuta are similar. Byakuya may not ever say this, but he serves as a cog to the Soul Society's laws. In the Soul Society arc, he serves the law without a thought, even at the death of Rukia. Yuji is similar in that no matter what, he'd save whoever without a thought, as pointed out by Maita. Yuji does sometimes also serve ideals, but they are not based on any kind of law. He serves the ideal of those he loves. This, stacked with Yuta, who seems to blindly serve his teachers and friends without a second thought, will only add to it. He even offers everything he has versus Geto just to protect people. Byakuya, seeing this, may see a bit of himself in their blind loyalty, while also prodding at what they serve and why they serve it. This could lead to probably the best outcome. We see when Ichigo breaks down why he wants to save Rukia and calls Byakuya scum, this changes Byakuya, even though the fight will have to end with a final clash resulting in one or more of our fighters being unable to battle. They may just change Byakuya for the better. This will allow Byakuya to live and help the same way he does when Ichigo tries to stop Aizen. This is where it ends. Aizen and Gin will show up to retrieve the Hogyoku and leave like he does in the manga. Now, that doesn't mean they lost. If in this scenario the captains realize what's happening, then they'll pull up like they did to help. Komamura will stop fighting Hakari, Yamamoto will stop fighting Shumsui and Ukitake, Maki will probably arrive with Soifon if she is alive or able to move. They'll come to support and Aizen will leave. I don't see a way they can stop him, but they did successfully save Nobu. One more reminder here, I was extremely generous to the Jujutsu Kaisen side of things, but I thought this was a fun idea. There are a few points where they could die, but I gave the interpretation where they win. Let me know if you disagree on how some of them interact or if there's anything I missed, and thank you all for watching.